My name's Susan Pincus and I'm the National Careers Professional at the College of Law. And I'm excited to have you here with me online today. Welcome to the College of Law, to the last actual College of Law Careers webinar for the year on the topic, Blaze Your Own Trail, Paving Your Own Pathway in the Legal Profession. Each month we deliver a 1-hour live webinar on a range of topics delivered by professionals across the legal industry, often our College of Law alumni, that were once where you are today. They generously share their tips, strategies and ideas that will help you kickstart your career as you transition from law student to PLT graduate to a career in or adjacent to law. Before we start, I would like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the lands on which we are sitting at this time and pay my respect to elders past, present and emerging. I am joined today by our three wonderful panellists, Frances Kalaki, Christy Preston and Ravi Wickramaratne. I hope that's right, Ravi, yeah?
Well done.
I had to practice that one. Frances and Christy will share their stories on how they paved their path in the profession, and Ravi will add his perspective and insights on the ground as a senior legal recruiter. Frances is an assistant director in the executive and governance team at the ACCC and is based in Melbourne. Christy is a law graduate, soon to be admitted to the profession, I believe next week, and she works with Chamberlain's law firm based in Sydney. And Ravi is a senior legal recruitment consultant with Gatehouse Legal in Melbourne. Before I pass on to the panel, a few housekeeping matters. We've allocated about 15 minutes at the end of the session to questions. So please enter your questions through the Q&A function and we'll do our best to answer all of those within the time frame. We record all our webinars, so the recording will actually be sent to you probably next week or the week after by our marketing team. And we'd also appreciate if you wouldn't mind just completing a feedback survey that I'll put the link into the chat function towards the end of the session, and that will just give us an idea of how we went today and also give us some ideas for future sessions. So we're going to get started, and I'm going to start off by asking this question to you all. So career paths can be structured and they can be very deliberate for some and well planned, whilst for others they can be more non-linear and circumstantial. So perhaps if we start with you, Christy, and you can give us a little bit of an overview of your journey to date, including like your interest areas while studying law and PLT and where you are now, and a little bit about what your current role involves.
Thank you, Susan. And I was smiling at your comment on non-linear because I feel like that's very true for my story, and hopefully I can help some of you with that as well. I also want to shout out, hi mom and dad who are watching from Canada today. So my career path in law has been slightly different. I started my working world in the fitness industry. I owned a gym in Canada and I'm still teaching yoga now. So it's kind of, everyone says, didn't you do this backwards? Don't most lawyers run in and become yoga teachers? But I think that's really served me well to have that foundation in wellness and to move into this profession. So I, unlike a lot of my peers in law school, didn't go through the traditional clerkship route, and I was never a paralegal. I jumped sort of straight into the graduate role, which I took a lot of benefit from doing things a little bit differently. I know that so many of my friends were very stressed out with that process through law school. It was a great path for some, but it sort of felt like that was the only route to take. And I just decided to do things a little bit differently, as I've been known to do, and instead decided to work part-time as a Pilates and yoga instructor, and then once I graduated from the from law school, take PLT and go in to do a legal graduate role. So that's a bit of my background.
And in terms of like the area of law that you're practicing in now, was that always the goal?
No, I thought I had a great question, and sorry, I forgot that piece. I thought I would go into family law, and I now help companies get divorced, I like to say, which is sort of the ideal structure for me. I come from a family that is very well versed in business, so I've had the benefit of sort of growing up around business discussions, and it feels a little bit familiar to be in corporate disputes, which I'm in now. And I don't have to take on sort of the emotional toll of a child custody battle or something like that. So I think I've landed very sort of naturally well in a space that I didn't really come to thinking that I would love in the beginning of law school. And I feel like if there's one takeaway from that, it's just stay open to the people that inspire and are around you. It was one of my Pilates students, Jane, who's a barrister, who introduced me into the role that I'm at now and into this world that she's so familiar with. And being around her, I just knew I kind of wanted to do what she does. So that's how I landed in this kind of law. And it's worked out beautifully for me. This is where I'm meant to be, absolutely. So that was my takeaway.
I was going to ask you, Christy, if you mind sharing your lovely story about how you ended up at Chamberlain's.
I would, yeah, love to. So it's sort of a roundabout social media story, but my student Jane is Jane Needham SC, and she's a big mentor of mine. Came to my Pilates class one Sunday, and I have a tradition in my classes of doing a little story. And so I was talking about law school, and Jane came up to me right after and basically was like, here's my wing, get under it. I am going to help you. So she gave me a few friends that she knew, and eventually our sort of student-teacher relationship grew into more of a friendship. She is on TikTok, I am not. I have enough Instagram and things in my life, but I love the friends that I do have on there because they send me sort of the highlight reel. And Jane had seen James, who is my boss now, runs an Instagram, a famous Instagram and TikTok account in the law world called Coffee and a Case Note. And he had issued sort of statement, and I'm in his office right now, which is very kind of him. He'd sort of put out on TikTok that they were looking for lawyers at Chamberlain's and it would be great to apply. And I did that knowing that Chamberlain's is a firm that really embraces things done slightly differently. And it's been a great sort of launch pad into this legal world. So all through that roundabout connection.
Yeah, that's a classic. I love that. How about you, Francis? Do you want to tell us a little bit about your start?
Thanks, Susan. So I think circuitous is a good word to describe my career path. You know, circuitous being, longer than the most direct way. I didn't actually start in law, so I didn't get the marks for it initially, and I went into finance. I went to work for a bank, and I qualified as a chartered accountant. And I went to London, and I worked for some more banks, and then set up a business and sold it. Came back to Australia and worked as a chief financial officer. And then realised that, I needed something more meaningful in my life. And I was fortunate enough to then study law full time, which was a really enjoyable experience in my life. And then I was particularly fortunate to go and work for the ACCC, which is an organisation very much aligned with my values. So when I was studying law, my interests, much like Christy, were very much around family law. It's in Australia, it's a very modern law in the scheme of things. It's a creature of the Whitlam government. It seeks to achieve very positive outcomes in terms of the best interest of children. And, I guess my values, I'm very interested in law that makes a positive difference to people's lives. And, that certainly attracted me to the ACCC, where, we work to make markets better for all Australians. It's a Commonwealth agency, so it's a creature of the Competition and Consumer Act. Everything we do is governed by that act. And, at the ACCC, my team looks after and supports the commissioners, deliver key decisions through good governance. in detail. This means ensuring compliance with Commonwealth government obligations, ensuring the decision-making framework operates to deliver on our economy-wide focus, and many of the practicalities and less exciting things that make that happen. And I think, when it comes down to, the agency, there's no such thing as a typical week. One day I might be sitting in on a meeting where they're discussing practical measures to address the most significant economic issues facing Australia at the moment, which are, on the front page of the newspaper each day. Other days it'll be, dealing directly with a commissioner about a key governance issue. Other times it will be, how do we make our team more efficient? And so there's no such thing as that sort of standard day. It's the variety is really quite amazing.
Mm-hmm. And Francis, in terms of your kind of process of entering the profession, tell us a little bit about, was it always your kind of intention? You mentioned that you're interested in family law, but then you've kind of gone into a different area of law. Was that part of the plan?
Well, I guess part of it at that time of, okay, who do I want to work for? What are the opportunities available? It's very much a period of, what are my values? What's important to me in terms of an employer? What do I want out of the equation? And so thinking about my values, what do I need? I need to work for someone that makes an important contribution to the community. And these are my personal values, they're not everyone's. I need to feel that the work and the organisation makes a positive difference. So that becomes quite important, and therefore, narrow down, I guess, the targets and who I'm sort of interested in working for on that kind of basis.
Yeah, thanks for that. That's really, really good. And Christy, so I love that reference to the importance of values and being true to your values as well, and thinking about kind of what your needs are and whether that organisation will meet those. Ravi, tell us a little bit about your background.
Yeah, look, I guess the start of my career was a bit, you could say, normal for someone wanting to become a lawyer, in which I started university after high school wanting to be a lawyer, and I didn't have, similar to Francis, I didn't have the right grades to get into law school straight away. So I took a bit of an unorthodox pathway into law school. So I spent some time studying, and soon enough I decided that I actually didn't want to become a lawyer anymore. One, because I met my wife and she's also a lawyer, and then we thought, I think the elephant in the room was basically, okay, which one of us is going to choose the legal profession? So anyway, she was almost done, so it was a case of, but that wasn't really why. But I then I always had a passion for helping people. That was kind of why I initially wanted to start in the legal industry. And although the profession, allows me to exactly do that, the passion to actually practice wasn't there. So I continued through my university life working in the automotive industry, but it came back to a situation where I still wanted to continue helping people, and doing what I was doing, I actually felt like I was ripping people off. So a couple of friends who worked with me where I was moved into recruitment, and I started having preliminary chats with them as to what it was like, and how they felt, whether they felt fulfilled in helping changing someone's life and making a difference. And they said, it's one of the best moves I ever made. And then for me, it was a case of, okay, which industry do I actually choose to go into and be a recruitment consultant? And I think for me, I guess law didn't choose me. I think it was the fact that I found it was almost like my calling, where like everyone else looking for a new job, you jump on Seek, you look and you see what's out there. And funnily enough, one of the first roles that I applied for was Gatehouse, and and it's funny, and I'll talk about this a bit later with everyone, but it was the conversation that I had in my first interview with our director, which had nothing to do with the job, but it was just more about my values and what it was to me about and why I thought that this would be the right role for me. And and I've been here now for 4 years, and I love it. And the fulfillment of helping people and the reaction when you tell people, look, we've actually got you what you wanted, which they thought was far from a reality, is it's a really nice feeling to have.
Yeah, it's funny, isn't it, how you went back to law. So
Yeah.
you started off there, and
did.
then you're still there. So both you and your wife are there.
Yeah.
Thanks for sharing that, Ravi. So kind of just moving on now, I wanted to ask you a little bit about your experiences. So we talk about the advertised market, job market, where positions might be advertised on Seek and other platforms. And we also talk about the hidden market, which is going kind of through the back door, so to speak, or kind of going through your network and your people that you've met in the profession. What approach did you use when you were finding work in law? And did this in kind of include applying for clerkships and graduate programs?
I can speak to that. I took both sort of the front door and the back door approach, and it was the front door through the classic Seek search. I was looking for jobs at the time. I was living on the northern beaches, so I thought that would be great. And I had an interview, and the firm culturally just wasn't a match for me. And that's when I had approached Jane just as an off sort of line conversation that turned into, oh, hey, like I've seen this ad and this sort of company culture seems like it might suit you. So for me, it was a combination, and I feel like that's always a good thing to have. But I ended up through the back door.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a classic story. Francis, for you?
I think, I guess just talking to the government sector. So the government sector is very structured. They have a very strict approach to, merit and assessment and so forth. So, it's very much about, okay, there's an advertised job, you go through, you apply, you use selection criteria and so forth. I guess beyond that, in terms of the hidden job market, and I guess I take this as kind of, roles that may not be advertised because someone's not sure they need a person there yet. I think the usual rules apply. If you build relationships, you demonstrate that you can deliver value, do the less pleasant jobs well, then doors will open naturally. So I think that's always important to remember. Clerkships, everyone I applied for, I got knocked back on. That was a bit hard at the time, but in hindsight, it's probably a very, very good gift for me. It's a process I still have no real insight on, I suppose. Susan?
Yeah, yep. Okay, no, thank you for that. In terms of like the skills and the experience that you developed through your law studies and also through working outside of law as well, particularly Francis coming to kind of law later in life, and also Christy with you, like working in other areas outside of law. How important were those skills and that experience in terms of your job applications, and how did you bring those into your conversation?
I think, as Ravi said, the interview questions, once you get to that phase, generally I found them to be far more casual than I was expecting. They sort of look for similar interests, and you have to remember that you'll ultimately be spending a lot of time with this person, and it's not just a list of sort of skills that they need. They also want to find the right sort of personality fit. So having a personality that was a little bit more diverse than your classic sort of HT student with mooting and all of that stuff is great for that type of personality, but coming in with a bit of a different background, like I'm a yoga teacher, my boss used to be a rapper. So it was interesting to kind of blend that. And you'll find, I've often found in law that a lot of us are pretty quirky, and there's usually something sort of extra about everyone in terms of their skill set. So it's a good thing.
Yeah, that's great. So kind of really bringing your personality into that was really important. And the fact that you were a little bit different and unusual as well. But that would also talk to a lot of skills that you would have picked up. What type of skills do you think you would have talked to?
In an interview, or
in interview and just generally in your conversations?
It would have been sort of like a bit of resilience. I mean, moving across an ocean is something that takes a lot of courage and to do in your late 20s, or any time really. But yeah, that was something that sort of wouldn't be met on a typical resume, but is a skill that's held me really well in law, because anyone will know the saying is you're going to cry at least 3 times in your first year, and I think I'm far past that. But there's an element to this job that's really can be quite stressful. So having that sort of resiliency in some of your skill set background, however you have demonstrated that or gone through that, I felt was really important.
Yeah. Absolutely. And also like your experience in dealing with people from all walks of life, and that kind of that emotional intelligence, the EQ and the relational as well. Like that would have been something that you would have had significant strengths in.
Right. Thank you.
Yeah, I think you're playing yourself down a little bit, but yeah, I could see like heaps of skills there. And Francis, what about for you?
Oh, certainly. The communication, that's a huge one. So, written skills, verbal communication skills. On the softer side, it's that ability to read a room. As you're delivering something. You need to be able to say, okay, is this the right time to throw it in, or do I need to just step back here? Reading a room, having those emotional, let's say the emotional skills, very, very important. The other thing, particularly I guess within the ACCC context, is that problem solving, having a structured approach to being able to solve problems, really, really valuable. But yeah, communication is way, way up there at the very top. Don't ever, make a spelling mistake, put the comma in the wrong place, anything like that. It's just, it will get you thrown in the dungeon. Yeah.
Most definitely. And Ravi, I'm sure you can talk a lot to that.
Yeah, I can. Actually, there's if you don't mind, Susan, I've got a bit of a story I'd like to quickly tell you guys.
Yeah, sure.
Kind of following on what Christy said. There was once a person that I met at a networking event, and she was telling me about her kind of interview process that she went through for a government role. And what she'd included in her CV. Now, at the beginning, when Francis said, you got to be able to read the room as well. Similar to that, she could really sense that the interview was not going well at all. And the questions that she was being asked, she was, kind of stumbling, and, because of that, she was getting nervous and all that kind of thing. And then the topic of classical piano came up, and she was a classical pianist. Now, I say that if you're doing classical music or any form of instrument, you've got this, I guess, ability and these skills that can really be transferable into law in terms of critical thinking and all that kind of thing. Critical thinking, patience is another thing. It went from her feeling like this interview was it was complete shambles, to it actually being one of the best experiences she ever had, because the interviewer, which was her principal solicitor, ended up also being a classical pianist. And they got off on that, and they really liked each other. So, it wasn't just about what she knew, but it was about, what she had done in her personal life that helped her get her job.
Yeah, that's a great story. And I think that's kind of something really important. Often by even incorporating kind of your interests into your CV, that can be a good icebreaker, and it can help form that link. So I think that's really good point, Ravi. I was just going to ask Francis just on that. So in terms of your kind of functional skills coming from the kind of the accounting, chartered accountant background and working in banking. What or how did you talk about those in your interviews and your applications? Did they come into play?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, no one, it's not about, explaining how a revenue projection model might work, or, accounting standard or tax law or whatever it might be. It's about how can I show that I can break down complex issues and communicate them simply to other people. So yeah, absolutely, very much around, I guess, how can I communicate effectively in the circumstances, as well as, I guess, manage my own work, schedule issues, projects, all that kind of thing.
Yeah. Ravi, perhaps you want to talk a little bit about the types of skills, experience, knowledge, etc., that you're looking for when you're interviewing candidates for potential jobs in the law market. Yeah. So what? Oops, you're just on mute.
Sorry. Yeah. Look, that's a really good one. There a lot of law graduates and PLT graduates, when they come through the system and they get to the stage where they're applying for roles, a lot of them say, look, I haven't done a clerkship, I was knocked back from clerkships, or I didn't have the academic transcript to be able to get into a graduate program, or nor did I have the grades at the time to get into a clerkship. And because of that, a lot of people become, I guess, disheartened, and they don't, they end up kind of giving up on certain firms or certain organizations. But someone once told me, and this is a lawyer once told me, is that I can teach someone the law, but I can't teach them how to be a good person. And as a graduate coming into the legal profession, not knowing much about the law, because look, frankly, at university, you don't understand how to apply the law. They don't teach you how to apply the law. They teach you the basics of law. But the first kind of set of work that you do is at the College of Law, where you actually get to apply the law in certain aspects. So, we all firms, everyone assumes that you know nothing. And coming into the legal profession, you got to have the interpersonal skills, or all the soft skills that Francis mentioned, that Christy mentioned, that you mentioned, Susan, are the most important things that you can have, because you'll learn everything once you start. But if you can demonstrate that you're capable, if you can demonstrate that you're switched on and that you can learn and that you're coachable, that's the main thing, is that you're coachable. You can go a long way. I guess some of us coming in to the legal profession, being one of the most, I guess, prestigious professions in the world, I think we all have, a certain ego that we bring with us. But I think the main thing is you got to be able to set all those things aside and just become, a blank canvas that people can then take you on and just teach you everything. But if you don't have those soft skills, it won't matter.
Okay.
And that's what we look for, especially putting you in front of a client or putting you in front of anyone to interview. You got to have those skills to be able to impress them, because you got to leave them with some sort of, story about you that captures them to remember you. And that story could be the difference of you getting the job or not.
Okay, no, that's really great. And I love the idea and that whole theme about showing that incredible kind of willingness to learn as well. And that coaching, that you are coachable, as opposed to kind of feeling like you know it all. Yeah.
That's right. And I'm reading a book at the moment called Good to Great by a person called Jim Collins. And one of the quotes that Jim had in there is that great vision without great people is irrelevant. And that's very true from a firm's point of view, but also from an individual's point of view. You just got to be a good person, really.
Yeah. I just want to ask you a question, Ravi, as well about like a lot of our listeners. I'm assuming that they might either be studying law at university or they might be current PLT students or alumni. How easy is it for someone to transfer from one practice area to another? So this is a question that often I get asked. So if I start off in one area, how am I able to move into another area as opposed to kind of being stuck a bit?
Look, that's a really good question, but I guess it really depends on what practice area that you're wanting to transition into. There are certain practice areas where you have skills that you've obtained that are easily transferable into a new practice area. For example, if you were to start as a commercial litigator and you want to move into a different type of litigation, you've got the foundation of litigation to be able to take you into that practice area. But if you're a planning and environment lawyer and you want to become a criminal lawyer, it's two completely different areas of practice that you just can't take anything with you, aside from things that Francis mentioned, which are your drafting skills, etc. Now, look, that being said, if you want to transition into another practice area, you can do it. It's not hard to be able to do it. You just got to find the right people to be able to give you the opportunity. But the biggest factor with a lot of people when they decide that they want to transition into another area of practice is their financial capacity, because they've taken on a role with a certain salary, and all of a sudden, you've got financial commitments around your salary, and you're wanting to transition into another area of law, but it means that you're taking a step back in terms of your pay. So if there is people who are wanting to do so, I would encourage people to know that quite early on in your career. And that's, I guess, for some of us, that's where graduate programs are ideal, because you get to do your rotations and you get to kind of delve into different areas of law, but that's not available to everyone. And that's why striving to get to a big firm is great. I think it's really good if you can get that exposure and be able to have that on your CV. But I think that's where the beauty of boutique law firms, really, really helps you, because if you're in a boutique law firm and they're multidisciplinary, you've got the ability to be exposed to different practice areas. So it really gives you the ability to kind of narrow down on what it is that you want to do. Some people go 15 years and they want to change their practice area, which is quite a leap, but people do it. It's similar to Francis' journey where, you were in a CPA and an accountant and then decide to become a lawyer. I think you could relate those two stories of change in practice areas. So in answer to your question, Susan, you can do it, but there is a lot that needs to be taken into account: transferable skills, salary, and how much of a change are you making to your everyday life.
Okay, which kind of like feeds into the next question I was going to ask you all, and that is about how important is it in terms of forming those relationships and those connections in the profession, and when is the best time to start with that? So maybe you can start, Christy, and just you've already kind of talked a little bit about that, but how important was that for you?
Well, what I've come to learn is that lawyers love a party. So it seems like every week there's some kind of event going on, and my attitude has been just say yes to any invite that I'm offered and go in and just be me and as natural as possible and see who I can connect with. And there's so many tools now of how we can reach out after. So I'll usually go into an event like that, we'll link in with each other, and then down the road, it's actually a pretty small world, the legal profession. So you'll kind of come across different people who know each other. And I would say it's vital, especially as I progress my career moving forward. These are the connections that are like my Jane, but now I have many more Janes, so to speak, and I can be sort of, in contact. A lot of my law school friends, like that's how I started building this really important network. A lot of friends of mine are in top tier firms, are in boutique firms, and having exchanges with them just about simple things like, hey, how much are you making? Because that doesn't look like my number, or whatever it may be. It's so important to start to get a sense of what's going on. And the best way to do that is to get outside, I think.
Yeah. And in terms of like the best way to reach out to people, what would your advice be? Like, is it a good idea just to pick up the phone or to do it through social media, email?
I would always start with the LinkedIn first and sort of get the chat going there. And usually it will extend on to, hey, here's my number, and we'll text and we'll meet up for a coffee. That's generally the pathway. I don't have any business cards, so I couldn't give them anyone. I feel like that's sort of a lost art in and of itself. But yeah, that's my path, and has been just get that sort of network building, because from there too, you can also see, oh, they went to they did the PLT, or you can start to build into how does my path look like theirs, and who are their connections as well.
Yeah, so building that kind of common ground.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
Yeah. Okay. And Francis, how about you?
I think just to add to what Christy said, it's very important to know the market, to understand who's operating in the space. If you're interested in family law, you need to know the different firms. What are their specializations? You know, is it big money cases? Is it child custody, et cetera, et cetera? You need to understand that. And you know, that comes by talking to people, linking in with them, having coffees, you know, face to face. It's really important. You've just got to know it as best you can, and that'll give you the most information to make good decisions on.
Right. Okay. And in terms of the face to face, how easy is it to get in front of someone, and how is the best way to do that? Because you are asking someone that potentially could be a stranger to give some time to you. So how do you approach that?
Well, I mean, you could break that down into a lot of different steps. I guess the first one is, you know, the mindset that you have something valuable to contribute, and therefore having a meeting with this person is going to be worthwhile. You know, it's in their interests as well. That's I guess, a first step. The second step is, well, you're going to get knocked back, so you know, get used to it and just get on with it. You know, the more meetings you have, or the more knockbacks you get, the closer you will get to actually having a meeting. You know, it's almost, if you like, a sales process. The object of it is to sell yourself in. And when I say sell, it's about communicating what you have to offer there. I'm a huge believer in some respects, particularly the higher up the tree you're going. And this is just from, you know, anecdotal from my own experience, but actually writing a letter and putting it in the post box. No one gets letters anymore. No one gets any letters anymore. I could tell you, you know, there's agency heads in Australia who will get, you know, thousands of emails a day and have 2 EAs to support them, et cetera, et cetera. But, you know, they'll get 5 letters a week. So, you know, thinking creatively, thinking differently. You know, Christy's got the best example of a creative, different approach, can pay dividends.
Okay, that's a good one. I never thought of the letter one, but yeah, why not? I think kind of that's it, isn't it? That you've got to just tweak your strategies and try different ones rather than keeping on doing the same one and expecting a different result. So, and Ravi, what about from your perspective, even in terms of kind of staying in touch with the market, obviously, and what's going on in the market, and how are you best to do that?
Yeah, look, there's obviously various ways to be able to kind of be educated as to what's going on. And obviously one avenue is to contact someone like me and find out, you know, where are you seeing the most demand? Where are you seeing, you know, because obviously with everything going on in the world, there's never a same day. Things can change overnight. And, you know, prior to COVID, we saw that, you know, family law was kind of busy in different aspects or different times of the year. But we found that, you know, after COVID, family law is one of the most busiest practice areas because of, you know, various things happening. People were, you know, in lockdown together and all sorts of things that arose that obviously created work for people. So, and, you know, for current graduates, it's an amazing time for them because I think the most common response from a lot of people is no one's hiring. No one wants graduates, no one wants us. But now we're seeing that a lot of people are wanting graduates. They're wanting people to come in to firms where before they wouldn't do so. From what both Christy and Francis were saying about, networking and having chats with people and coffees, and like Francis said, you will get knocked back. But the key thing here is persistence. So you got to be persistent. You got to keep trying. And a lot of us want a result straight away, but we need to learn to plant the seed and wait for that to happen. But it's also up to you when you are actually meeting these people to do your research on these people, not just to see, read about them on their website and just find out a little bit about you got to Google them, because they'll Google you before they meet you, and they'll bring up something, could be, and this is why, even coming through law school, we got to be careful about what we put on social media. We got to be careful about what we do, because people will dig things up and they'll bring it up. And that's where we need to do the research on them, because then they can see that we're committed and that we're not wasting their time. And a lot of those people that we meet will be delighted, and you'll be surprised at the amount of people that will actually say yes, because they want to be able to help the next generation of lawyers. But you got to be able to put in the time to do the research, so you know what you're looking for, and that person is what's needed for your future.
Yeah.
And people like that will tell you what's going on in the market, because they're recruiting and they know where they're losing things. So being up to date is about contacting the right people, speaking to the right people, reading the financial reviews, reading the law reviews. All those avenues can help you find out what's going on.
Yeah, I really like your point. Yeah, go on, Christy.
Robbie and Francis, when they were speaking, great points, and it just made me think back to mine, and just that when you are linking in with someone, add the note, add the hi, how are you? Don't just make the connection. Even if it's someone, I was in a Court of Appeal case and I linked in with this barrister, and my note was like, oh my gosh, I just loved, and I never heard from her. Totally fine. But it's nice to say like why you're reaching out to them right away, because I will now get sort of 3 or 4 LinkedIns a day from people that I don't know. But if they write me to say, oh, I love the firm that you're working for, or I love this, then I'll link in with them. So use that sort of add note feature when you're doing that networking, because if you just match with me, I might say yes, I might say no, but if there's a note, then.
Yeah, it's just taking that extra time, isn't it? I mean, it's not a lot of time, but I think that if you're asking someone for their time, I think it's kind of also really important that you do your research and that you look up their background and you find out like where you have that common link, and you even just prepare some questions. I think if you're going in thinking it's going to be a quick fix, this is going to lead to a job, I think that will come across, and that's not really a good look at all. We're going to just come up to a final couple of questions before I open it up to questions from the audience. So if you all want to start putting your questions in to the Q&A area, that would be fantastic. I can see that we've got a few already, but if you want to start doing that, and in the meantime, I'm going to just ask you all 2 last questions. So the first one is, any other practical advice that you may have for individuals kind of in the final stages of their law study?
Hang in there.
Okay. You can do it. Yeah.
For me, that was a big challenge, the last sort of leg. So hang in there. You've got this. It is worth it to get to the finish line. And just know that things are going to shift in a really great way when you are complete with your studies. And the big world is not as scary as it might seem.
Great.
I think,
Francis?
Oh, sorry, go.
Or Ravi?
Ravi, please, and then I'll jump in after.
Okay, no worries. Thanks, Francis. Look, like I said before, just be persistent. You've gotten this far, and somewhere someone has your name written on a contract. So on an employment contract. So don't give up. Don't get disheartened by knockbacks. Knockbacks is what makes you. It may break you, but it is what will make you in the end. So be persistent, believe in yourself and believe in your ability, and don't be afraid to put yourself out there.
Thanks, Ravi.
I guess from a government recruitment point of view, if you've missed the graduate programs, jump on apsjobs.gov.au, have a look at the APS 4-5 entry-level positions. These are another mechanism to get in the door if you've not got a grad role. The other thing you want to think about is registering on the temporary employment registers on the apsgov.au website, where they do recruit from. Recruitment is hard at the moment in APS. The market is very different. So don't be one bit shy of approaching recruitment agencies that work with the Commonwealth Government. They know a lot about it. They know who's hiring, who's not. Get a foot in the door. And once you're in the door, then all of a sudden, a whole lot of other things can happen. And I guess, take your time, talk to as many people as possible, and have a really convincing case for what you bring to the table. Why are you interested in this organisation? Why are you interested in this area of law? Have that down pat.
Great. That's really good advice. Last question. Would you do anything differently with the benefit of hindsight and experience?
Everything.
What would you do differently, Christy?
I'm only joking. I am very content in the moment right now where I'm at. So I can't say that there's any sort of path that I would do differently, but as the theme of this talk is, it's all about sort of doing things differently. And that's why I feel like I'm so happy in the spot that I've landed. I came into law sort of 10 years older than everyone in law school. And it's a profession that really, as we've said all along through this, lends to that emotional quotient, EQ. So I'm grateful that I had the time to build up, and I might be at a different salary band now if I started earlier, but I don't think I would have felt the same sort of fulfillment and certainty. So nothing.
That's great. Yeah. Love that. Francis, for you?
I think we're all richer for the holes that we fall in along the way, and very much in Christy's vein. It's about showing that you've learned from your experiences and bringing that to the table. It's valuable. It's something that you have to offer.
Certainly makes for a more interesting story as well. Yeah. And Ravi?
Yeah, look, I think don't have any regrets. In hindsight, if we had the opportunity again, I don't think I'd change anything. And talking from a recruiter's point of view, I don't think everyone has their own, whether it's conventional or unconventional pathway into the legal profession. And like I said before, it is what will make you in the end as to who you are. So don't have any regrets, because your pathway is very different to someone else's, but it got you to where you are today. So be grateful for that.
Okay, thank you. All right, now we're going to move on to question time. We'll see how we go in terms of being able to answer them just in the last 10 minutes. I was just going to have a look here. We've got advice for someone that's come out of the military that doesn't have a network in law and who has worked their way to completing a JD. So advice there.
I can certainly jump in there. I mean, government roles have a very structured approach to recruitment. There's also what they call a recruitability scheme, which is probably best if people look that up individually, but which can level the playing field in many respects. And certainly, having worked, we at the agency do have a number of people with military backgrounds, veterans of various different persuasions, if you like. So there is a place for you. It's very much about, that persistence and finding it.
Right. Okay. Thank you. How do you deal with no response despite being very qualified and competent?
I
It
think-
hurts and it happens. Sorry, Robbie.
And I go for it, Christy.
No, I think, as Francis said about the buckets that we fall in, you're not going to get into a legal role without hearing no at least once. And the more you build up the resilience for it, the more it can strengthen you. And I know that this phase of sort of being at the end of your legal journey, if you're in school and getting everything marked and seeing every sort of bit of your life feeling like it's evaluated, can be emotionally really draining, but it's all going to be empowering at some stage. So the no was meant to be, not for you, and thank the universe for not giving it to you, because something better is coming.
Yeah. I always think, you know, you get a lot of no's, but you only need one yes. So hang in there. Ravi, this question's for you. You talked about being a nice person, having transferable skills. How transferable are general skills as leverage to bridge the salary gap post-admission for a graduate, especially for someone already mid-career?
I guess that's kind of, I touched on that, I guess, before, about how difficult it might be to change practice areas once you're mid-career or you're changing or a second career lawyer, for example. Your general skills or your soft skills will be quite valuable. But if you're someone who's, you know, been mid-career and had, you know, $150,000 salary, it's going to be very hard for you to achieve that as a graduate lawyer. We do have a lot of people who, you know, for example, if you were if you're working in tax and you were at the ATO or at one of the big four accounting firms as a tax consultant, or you know, an indirect tax consultant or something like that, there are a lot of skills there that you can take into becoming a lawyer in that in tax. But that's, I guess, one of the unique examples where that can be done. But in order to answer the question, it's not easy because you're virtually changing your entire profession. So yeah, no, that's not easy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How do you communicate that you're coachable?
It's not something that you can obviously verbally communicate, but you got to be able to form, I guess, in a discussion, you got to be able to put yourself out there to show them that, you know, you can take information on board, that you're not going to, that you can take critical feedback. It's about showing those, I guess, the body language and the signs that, you know, okay, I'm ready to do this. I'm ready to be taught. I'm ready to take on feedback. I'm basically that I'm, you know, you can throw anything my way and I'll do it. It's not about being a yes man. It's more about saying, look, if you teach me something, I'll do it. But as a graduate, you got to learn. You sometimes got to learn to say no when the time comes, but you also got to learn to say yes to everything if it means it betters your career. And that's what it means about being coachable, because they know a lot more than you do, and that's why you've gone to them, and you got to respect that.
Okay. What about for those studying law online where it's harder to meet people?
Well, if there's one thing that COVID's taught us is that anything can be done online. So, you know, for a lot of people, that's where LinkedIn and Christy could probably talk about this better, and the power of social media, is that, you know, you can still meet people. It doesn't have to be a coffee. But if you're studying online and you're still in a city or within access to a city, you can still, if you really want to, you can still make it happen in any way, shape or form.
I think it's true too in this whole work from home culture. And I just, on days that I am working from home, the hermit in me has to set aside, like, I need to go outside once to a Pilates class or to a coffee with someone or to something that I'm getting in the way of other people. So if you are online all day, make that a goal. Just one time, go outside for whatever reason and put yourself in the way. Like, there are many other lawyers in Pilates classes. Sometimes you never know, but that could be the day that you meet one. Great. And now you've got a new connection, but it is tough. And like Robbie says, you can do a lot online now. So leverage that, but also now that we can, go outside. Yeah.
Yeah. This is an interesting question. In terms of when applying for a new job, do you think it would be a good idea to show up in the office or the firm physically instead of just sending them your resume? Would that be a good standout strategy?
No.
It was a good try, but a little like pushy maybe. Some firms might think differently, but like our receptionist, they would be like, okay, it's, yeah, sure.
Yeah.
But everything is so portaled now and streamlined through, I know the big firms at least will have sort of 4 or 5 filter questions, like, you know, that will direct you into the right spot. So
I mean,
yeah.
that being said, that being said, if it is like a small suburban firm, I think that approach still might be okay.
Or regional even.
Or
yeah.
regional. Yeah, but if we're talking big city firms, the receptionist will most likely just put that into the pigeonhole of one of the partners, which will then get accessed by the EA, and they'll just, and who knows what will happen to it after that. So yeah.
Yeah, and I don't even know if it's such a great idea anyway to be just sending your resume off to people. I think you just want to be really careful about that strategy. This is a very kind of deep and meaningful question. How do you know once you've found your desired practice area?
I don't think there's one answer to that question.
I think it's maybe it's a bit like when you've met the one, you just know.
I love that. Yeah. Okay. We just got a few more minutes, so I'll keep going along here. If in an interview you were asked, where do you see yourself in 5 to 10 years' time, what should you say so as not to appear overly ambitious or lost with your direction?
I would probably answer that question just on the spot now and say, you know, 5 years ago, if you'd asked a little girl in Canada if she'd be in Australia, no way. And here I am, and I've never been happier. So my commitment to myself is be in the moment, learn as much as I can, and develop as I go and grow. So yes, I might have a vision, but it's certainly not a step-by-step plan. And that's been part of what's made the journey of my life so far arrive in this country. So yeah, that would be my honest answer, and it would hopefully not make me seem too ambitious, but I think that's quite a popular one.
Okay. This one's like, there's a couple of questions. I'm going to link these together. So around the importance of grades and academic transcripts, as well as the university that you go to. How important are they, do you think? Maybe Ravi, you might want to answer this one.
Look, it depends where you want to take your career. There are, you know, if you want to end up in the top tier firms, that takes a great emphasis. They do take a great emphasis on academic transcripts and also the universities in which you've graduated from. Even 10, 12 years down the track and you're already a senior associate and you're at a mid-tier firm and you want to go to a top tier firm, grades do become a factor. But we're finding that more and more it comes down to the actual partner of the firm that you're trying to interview with. And so, I mean, look, at the end of the day, if you do have ambitions to be in the big corporate world in law, I would say maintaining your grades would be very beneficial. But it's not the be all and end all. So there are a lot of people out there because, you know, the reality is, you know, more often than not, we go into university in our late teens, early 20s. And, you know, we've all of a sudden got this freedom out of high school and, you know, people want to party and do all those things that people do in their 20s, and they kind of lose track of their studies, and you can't blame each other for that. But then there are those who are very academically sound as well. So, but, you know, in answer to that question, I would say, if you do want to be able to get into those big firms, then, you know, that's the path you want to go down. Then I would put a bit of an emphasis on your grades. You know, usually someone who graduates with honours at a university, especially in Melbourne, your Monash's, your Melbourne unis are the ones that are looked at closely.
All right, we're going to come to an end now, and I just want to say a huge thank you to Francis, Christy and Ravi for sharing your insights and experience with us all. I've no doubt that the participants in today's session have found it very valuable and will take away some advice that they can put into practice immediately. And just to say, don't forget to connect with us, make sure you're aware of upcoming events and programs at the college. We've got a number of articles and posts nationally that we share with the profession on LinkedIn, and also just via resources and events page on the College of Law website. So a big thank you to all of our wonderful panelists today, and I hope that everyone has found it very valuable. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Susan.
Thank you, Susan.
Thanks everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye.